Welcome back to another episode of Engage. Here again with Ian Turner and Josh Cantrell, the chairman, vice chairman of the scheduling committee. Fellas, welcome back. Thanks for being here.
Hello again. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, how's your summer going?
It's just starting, but it feels like we've been in summer for the last 6 months.
Yeah, we definitely haven't gotten those, what they call the shoulder season breaks or the seasonal breaks. It's just been churning nonstop, which both good and bad, but I'm sure you're tired on many different fronts. So hopefully you're getting some family time and some downtime throughout the summer. I want to have you back and talk about what I like to call weird slips and pay traps, and really some scheduling tools that pilots should better understand or better know before you hit accept. And so just to kind of set the stage, it seems like pilots have scheduling tools that are in our contract that either historically weren't very common, but now we are using things. What are you seeing out there? How can pilots optimize their schedules for both quality of life and pay treatments? And why are these scheduling options getting more attention?
Yeah, so there is on the Delta NBC website. It's a little bit older document, but it's always, I think we put it out in some of our weekly news is to, hey, go take a look back at this document because it's a great document. It started as navigating your summer flying, and now it's called, it's an MEC brief called Optimize Your Schedule. So if you search Optimize Your Schedule on the Delta NBC website, you should be the first thing that pops up. But it was published back in May of 23. And it's a walkthrough of just strategies to make your summer schedule more manageable. Includes a lot of things, some outdated, but a lot of things around, green slip with conflict or white slip, yellow slip with conflict. It's a good read through that we encourage everyone to take a look at.
And I'll link that to the description of the podcast. I think you were saying it's published in 2023, but a lot of the information and the knowledge in there is unchanged. And, it is true. Optimize your schedule for what works for you. So we'll link that to the description of this podcast. Check it out and really become familiar with some of those lesser used items, which are becoming more prevalent in scheduling and trip coverage. Let me ask you this. How are quick slips going? It's been a few months. Are they working in practice? What's the feedback you're getting? What are you hearing from pilots?
I think overall they're working pretty well. The biggest issue we see is the delay of putting the rotation on the pilot's line. If you go back to the way that it was originally discussed in concept, it was to have it automated and placed on the pilot's line basically immediately. But now what we're seeing are delays. And so the pilot's unsure if they got the rotation or not. And I think if that gets ironed out from the company side, then they'll be doing much better.
Okay, that's good to hear. And so in short, or if you've lived under a rock for the past few months, quick slips are a new creation, if you will, to help give some seniority and some guardrails to the chaos that was the inverse assignment process, which is still out there. Inverse assignments haven't gone away. It's just another step of coverage. So yeah, good to hear. I think you've been getting good feedback from pilots that they like a little bit of structure to the quick slip step of coverage.
Yeah, and Ryan, overall, like Ian was saying, we do think quick slips have been a positive thing for the pilot group. What we are seeing though is quick slips with the trip coverage report that is created in order to launch the quick slip. That's a new trip coverage system, a new flight crew legality system that was developed in what the company's calling TC 360 Trip Coverage 360, which is a program under the Career 360 umbrella. And with any new program, you're going to have issues. So we've seen various, we'll call them faults in the trip coverage system that the scheduling committee has been chasing down with the company. The company as well has been implementing as many fixes as possible when they run into issues with the trip coverage system, the TC360 system. So with quick slips in there, they've also built green slips and now white slips under the trip coverage 360 program. So we are keeping our eyes out for any sort of oddities that we see in the white slip or green slip steps now as well. So do your job on the line. If you guys see anything weird happening with an ARCOS call out or wonder why you weren't included on a trip coverage due to a weird code, it says you weren't legal for a certain reason, please reach out to the scheduling committee by submitting an STS inquiry. and we'll do our best to chase down any issues you might see.
Okay. Yeah, that's good info. Appreciate that. We talked about weird slips. We're all pretty familiar with what we have at our disposal, but you even alluded to yellow slips and yellow slip with conflict, which applies to reserve pilots, and we can dig into that. We also have another episode coming up specifically for reserve pilots, but talk to me about conflict flying. One area that seems to generate a lot of confusion is green slip with conflict and inverse assignment with conflict. Why do pilots often misunderstand those pay treatments as premium trips? I think a lot of pilots get wide-eyed and say, "Oh, I'm going to get paid triple, or I'm going to get paid double plus." I think you've been getting a lot of STS inquiries, and I know the elected union reps have been getting a lot of questions and feedback from pilots saying, "Hey, I didn't get double pay for this green slip with conflict." So what are pilots misunderstanding about those pay treatments?
I think it goes back to the age old initiation of it calling a green slip with conflict, because yes, it's premium, but if you look at an actual green slip with conflict, it's single pay for what you do plus single pay for what was removed. Pilots will bite off on green slip just thinking it's going to be double pay all the time. And it's not necessarily a bad deal, but it could be a bad deal based on what you're looking to do. So, right, if you have a 6-day trip and you get a green slip with conflict that's a 2-day, you're going to get paid for that 6-day single pay, but you're also going to get paid for the 2-day single pay. So you've basically done 2 days of work for that 8 days of pay. Whereas on the flip side of that, you could have a 2-day trip and get a green slip with conflict for a 6-day trip. And so, yeah, you're still getting 8 days of pay, but you're working 6 days there. So just the key takeaway is that it's single pay and single pay, even though it's called a green slip with conflict.
And the same goes for inverse assignment with conflict, right? Anything with a conflict, it's single pay plus single pay. So really, before you hit accept, slow down, do the math, and see if it works for you. And so just to peel back a little bit on your example, if I have a 6-day trip on my line that I got, let's say during PBS, so I was going to fly that for single pay and credit anyway, and then I get a green slip with conflict for a 2-day, then that is really a good deal because I get 2 days of single pay plus the 6 days of single pay for 2 days of work. And then really you could put in another slip and accept another green slip or a quick slip or something in that same footprint. Is that accurate?
Exactly.
And then just again, to kind of qualify here, the opposite of that, or maybe the lesser good deal is the opposite of that. You have a 2-day trip on your line. It's a quick out and back. It's a layover you enjoy. You get an offer for a green slip with conflict for that 6-day. You're going to get paid for the 2-day and the 6-day, but it's single pay each. So if that 6-day is worth, say, 40 hours and the 2-day is worth 10, you're going to get 50 hours total, not anything more. So that is less than double. And so I think that's where the confusion, and actually the Seattle reps put out a great LEC letter. If you want to dig in there, it's on the company iPad under ALPA and LEC, put out a great memo kind of explaining that math. So would you agree that the best deal is equal to your original trip length or less?
Yes, generally speaking, and in most cases, but that 6-day might be a layover you really wanted. So it might work out for you.
Yeah. All great points. Just make sure you do the math and figure out what works for you before you hit accept. And then you're obligated for, a 6-day that you didn't necessarily want because you thought it was tons of pay. Yeah. Thanks for walking us through that, real world example.
And then, Ryan, on the topic of conflict trips here, the less exciting version, right? We have the white slip with conflict, yellow slip with conflict, and then the often forgot about and often used or not often used reserve with conflict. I encourage everyone, I will put everyone to sleep if we start talking in detail about those, but just encourage everyone to, in that optimize your schedule guide, there's a white slip, yellow slip with conflict section, as well in the scheduling reference handbook. We have an entire reserve with conflict section. That reserve with conflict can be a pretty good deal overall. So just encourage everyone to read through those sections and submit STS inquiries if you have any questions.
Yeah, you're right. I even forgot about that reserve with conflict and the white slip with conflict. Can you give me either a real world or just a quick example of reserve with conflict? Because I think that is pretty lucrative if you're actually on reserve and you're actually getting awarded a trip.
Say you get assigned a 4-day rotation while on reserve. If you are in rest for that rotation area, or like 24 hours prior to the report of that rotation in rest, and you see a trip that pops up that reports earlier than that current rotation, you can put in a reserve with conflict slip in. And if you are awarded it, they will remove that 4-day trip. You will be awarded your other trip, but you'll be pay protected for the higher of the two rotations. So in this case, if you reserve with conflict a 2-day, you would actually get paid for the 4-day trip that was removed.
And pay being credit towards the guarantee.
Yes, pay and credit for your reserve guarantee.
Okay. Yeah, that could be some strategic scheduling tool that reserve pilots could use. So keep that in mind. I think that's, like you said, it's often forgotten and not often used, but that could be a great opportunity, especially with the amount of open time churning through the system. That's a great point. Let's shift to reroutes. We haven't talked about it. We don't need to get in the weeds on it, but maybe some reminders for pilots who are out there, because that's another often misunderstood concept, especially with contract 2019 rules. And I guess two parts of the question, but maybe you want to tell me what are the most common misunderstandings that pilots have regarding accepting a reroute, when reroutes are legal, when they're not legal, and then we can go into maybe the pay treatment for reroutes.
Reroutes, you really don't have a choice in many of them. There is a little section in the SRH of exceptions to the fly now, breathe later rule. And 23L4C, which is a reroute through your base, which comes with certain parameters you can refuse. But other than that, most reroutes you pretty much got to roll with.
Yeah, the only other case is if you are rerouted into an FAR extension, you can also deny that, but that's not an exception to fly now, breathe later. That's just a straight up FAR violation if that's the case.
Got it. Then there's the issue of what constitutes a PWA compliant reroute, right? If you're in rest on a layover, then you're not contactable. This goes back to, Josh, you've used the idea or the concept. Go back to 1982 and you have a rotary phone and that's it. So you're not aware of all the my crew and technology and all these things. So if you're in rest and you're on a layover, there are certain ways that you could be rerouted, and some are legal and some are not. Can you step us through that?
In the SRH, it talks about methods of contact kind of on the first couple of pages. If you're a pilot on a rotation, typically there's only 2 ways, and it's going to be through an ACARS notification that you've responded to or through a company representative. So if you're on your layover hotel, in your layover hotel, the company can attempt to contact you once, that is allowed, but you have no obligation to respond to that contact. So typically, most cases, you're going to receive a reroute while you're sitting there in cruise. You get the ding dong or your printer starts going, and that's your notification of your reroute. Otherwise, like you're talking about coming off the layover, you receive a reroute while you're on a layover that you're unaware of. You go down to the van, you hop in the van, go to the airport for that day. And when you get to your gate or earlier, you're like, oh, we're no longer flying this flight segment. What happened to it? At that point, you would reach out to crew tracking or talk to a gate agent or someone else who might be able to direct you towards the company to figure out what your schedule is for the day. If you've reported your RAP has begun, your total duty day has begun, but you're flying, your FTP not necessarily has begun in that case.
Gotcha. And reserve availability period, and that's all in the scheduling reference handbook, the SRH. Pivoting to, I guess, the fun part about, or the better part, the bright spot of a reroute is the pay treatment. Can you walk us through that briefly?
Yeah, so that's all going to be laid out in PWA 23L4, L8, and L9. There's also a little segment in L2 for regular pilots and 10 for being extended beyond 1 calendar duty day.
Yeah, and so looking at that, there's some confusion because previously it was like you could be rerouted within the footprint of your rotation, and really you had to be returned to base late in order to get pay treatment under L9. But now under L8, there's some things like compensation for reroutes that occur before the first break-in duty versus after the first break-in duty. And there's some, it's 150% pay versus 200% pay. Can we go over that?
Yeah, so 23L4 and B outline the pay treatments for reroutes that happen while you're on your rotation. L4A is anything in the current duty period that you were rerouted on, you receive 50% pay in addition to all your other pay for the rotation. And then anything in the next duty period after your first reroute is 100% pay in addition to all other pay for the rotation. We saw a lot of confusion with this when it was first rolling out, but let's say today you only have flight segments removed from you, and then tomorrow you start flying new flight segments to your rotation. The removal of a flight segment is a reroute. So today you're receiving 50% extra pay for the 0 hours of reroute flying that you did. And then tomorrow you're receiving 100% pay for the rerouted flight segments that you're flying. So there are cases where you don't fly any extra on the current day, but the pay treatment still triggers for the following duty period to go straight to 100%.
That makes sense. And that is kind of nuanced of that break-in duty or that layover is that breaking point, if you will, between the pay treatments. So pay attention to that. When you look at your time card, those are now embedded in the top part of the time card as RRPY, but there's still a section towards the bottom blocks that have reroute pay. Tell me about those differences, because a lot of pilots just look to the bottom of their time card for that reroute pay and it shows nothing, but in line with your rotations, you'll see that RRP. What can pilots look for on their time card there?
Yeah, so the RRPY is typically a 23L4 pay treatment, L4A or B. The reroute pay column on kind of the middle section of your time card, that is applicable for 23L8 and 23L9, which are both late rotation reroutes. Your rotation gets back, you're rerouted past 4 or 25 hours outside of your original rotation footprint. Then you receive additional 100% pay, no credit for those reroute. One thing that will also confuse pilots is 23L10. That's beyond that 1 calendar day or duty period from your original rotation that you're rerouted into. There are pay treatments associated with that. And I believe the pay code they use is IP10, India Papa 10. So you'll see that in the upper portion of your time card if you receive a 23L10.
Okay, yeah, those are some of those weird codes that we're not used to seeing, but they're showing up more and more. So yeah, thanks for clarifying that. And those are compounding or pyramiding, if you will. So if you get it flying removed before your break-in duty, like you talked about, the 50%, and then after the break-in duty, you have add-on flying, that's essentially the double pay there, the 100%. And then if that flying took you later, they returned you to base later than 4 hours or 25 hours international, that's on top of for that duty period. And so you can look for those codes on your time card. Let's kind of wrap here on these, weird slips and pay traps, because we've covered some really good stuff. What are you seeing in terms of STS inquiries, and, what are the most common misconceptions that keep showing up through the STS system that you could clear up today?
So most of the reroute pay is pretty well automated now. We're not seeing many errors with that. I think the biggest issue we have from pilots is the confusion of if they were actually rerouted or not. So reroute is a definition in the PWA under section 2. So you can go look at that and see if you've actually been rerouted, but it's the addition or removal of a flight segment. So if you divert somewhere, that's not a reroute. If you just have late operations, that's not a reroute either. And so the biggest confusion we see are pilots that are thinking they're missing reroute pay for those two instances.
Gotcha. So pilots are feeling like they were rerouted, but they weren't necessarily. And so you're getting the STS inquiries on that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Anything else you want pilots to know for this episode?
I don't think so.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Ian Turner, Josh Cantrell from the scheduling committee. You guys are hard at work and never seem to get a break, but hopefully you'll get some. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your work and appreciate your help.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform, and receive notifications when a new episode is available.